Okay, so we just finished Act 2, and it's time once again to check in on this experience. Right now, the end of all this is still quite fresh, and it's an interesting time to talk about where we're at and what we're feeling about all this.
When you say fresh, you're literally talking about less than a minute ago.
That's correct. Slightly different experience for you than last time, where the minute after was after you sat out that entire fight, hiding in the corner.
My God.
That was brutal, man. So let's start off with a question I started off with last time. What surprised you most about Book 2 of Strange Eons? And not like the things that happened, we'll get to those, but like structurally, content-wise, and like how much, if you can even articulate this at this point anymore, like how much did what you found in Thrushmore go against your expectations? Do you even remember what your expectations were?
I'll answer that. I want to jump in. I just remember feeling like we had a chance. We got done with Briarstone, and we're on those boats and just being like, oh my gosh, we're going to go to a place where everything is not an absolute shit show. Everything is not the worst thing possible. We'll have at least like a chance to like put on some clean clothes and catch your breath and stuff. And it was like, nope. You thought it was bad there? Guess what? It's worse here.
Yeah.
And everyone hates you specifically. Yeah. They think you are the worst wretched piece of scum and villainy on the face of this planet.
Yeah.
Well, not me.
Nobody knew
Only
you.
because they didn't know you. Anybody that knew you were the worst. But that was...
So you were expecting a pause or a respite or
I was expecting
a
just a breath at least, and it was like, nope, there's no...
a slow build.
There's no breath, yeah. It was like...
There was no
just
build.
like, nope, that's the ship, that's your new companion, that's this, and then boom, you're in it.
Yeah.
I was expecting us to have a quick orientation to who we were, like for that to be suddenly made clear. Just to have it more questions unravel and more, instead of more answers, like more like expansion of the world that we come from.
And how much you didn't know about it.
And how much we didn't know about it. That was really jarring.
I thought we might shop.
Well, we did a little. We got to do a
Not
little
for
shopping.
days.
We eventually did, but yeah, it took a while. And then talked about this last book, but like what actions did your fellow players take that surprised you the most through the course of this act? I'll tell you what surprised me the most. The couple of times where I had to start an episode with, "We stayed."
Yeah, that's so
We're still on the stairs.
us.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
It's both unlike you in kind of a normal sense, but also this campaign, you've really, I feel like, taken my kickoff advice to heart of, play this like everything could be lethal and like you don't know how strong everything you're fighting is, and don't expect everything to be evenly balanced. And so I feel like you've been real smart about cutting and running, or waiting to. But then there was these couple of times where you stayed, and like to your all credit, in those instances you managed to do so much more with the very few resources you had left. So it was really cool, especially in the case of Fort Halecourse, where it was like that last little burst was the thing that allowed you to wrap it up.
But there wasn't even a decent way to extricate ourselves.
We definitely had the chance to extricate ourselves from Fort Halecourse. We had the chance to walk out the door.
Oh, that one. Oh, right. And then we went upstairs. Is that in the kitchen? We went upstairs.
Then we decided to take out some of the undead guards around the courtyard.
And then that turned
I
into a
hid
fight
under
with
the
all
bed
of them.
a lot.
Yes.
We really flexed our tactical
I think so.
Pathfinder knowledge to
bringing in all of the extra
Summons.
Yes.
I mean, that ended up...
Yeah, I think part of the confidence of going on in Fort Halecourse was just sort of like, there's a factor here that was not part of the group before.
Yeah.
And while I'm missing the other factor that we lost, this is tactically a very different game now.
Yeah.
And that was intriguing. And, I felt like when Dora ran out of spells, I was like, well, I'll give combat advice and I'll run around. But as long as Dabwick had spells, I was ready to keep going, which surprises me. That's not who I normally am.
Well, I mean, truly, some of my favorite moments were not when Dora was at full power, but when she's like barely, she's like, okay, I've got 2 or 3 mind thrusts left, and I'm saving them because I need them to count. And you're just waiting for just the right moment. I'm like, just
waiting and trying to stay out of the fray.
Yeah, yes. Trying to not die.
Like, I never thought of it as waiting. I thought of it as don't make anybody else expend any resource to keep me alive.
Yes.
Which is not a not fun game, to be honest.
Right.
Hiding under the bed is probably one of my favorite moments of the whole act.
Yeah, the tension was.
Yeah, it really felt like being in a horror movie.
And speaking of managing your resources, Katie, Tima went from something you used up every single fight, because it's one of your big guns to improve your ability to do stuff. But as we went along, your relationship to when and how you wanted to, and if you even would use her, became its own separate resource that you had to mitigate.
And I'm not one to gimp myself in anything, like to cheat myself of any advantage. You know what I mean? Like I'm very much like, let's drain every resource we have and get the maximize use of it. But I think however the relationship between Dora and Tima is developing is still uncertain to me.
Yeah.
And it's fun to think of her. It's fun for me to think of Tima as a potential liability. When Dabs was uninfected, there was no question Dora was not going to allow that to happen.
Right.
Especially after she tried it, and you made it very clear that if I failed the concentration check to restore, she'd say it.
Yes, I had to do that.
Yeah, it's great. I have to, but mechanically, I need to continue to figure out how this develops over time, so that it isn't just this thing that's giving me one spell,
right?
Per level,
right?
Because that's,
that you don't even cast necessarily.
That I tried to cast one time this at 6th level, and
it's a vile
failed
spell.
and thankfully failed.
Yeah,
as it would have fundamentally changed who Dora is.
Yeah.
But I think the dire circumstances of that moment warranted it. But having failed it, it was a good opportunity for Dora to say, you know what?
Maybe that's not who I am.
I'm just going to let this go.
Yeah. That fight was tough.
Yeah. It was the second Iris Hill incursion when we were all crowded around the gatehouse, just surrounded and
completely surrounded.
Yeah.
By 3 layers of bad guys. Yeah, it was bad.
That was rough.
You were about to jump in, Robert?
I was just sitting here thinking that as characters, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have ever discussed how any of us feel about Tima, especially because we know everything that we as players know, right?
Yes.
So we know she was actively working against our interests. And I don't know what that conversation would be, but I can't imagine we don't have thoughts about it. Like,
that might be a fun scene for Act 3,
it
right?
Might be.
It's an entity that becomes part of our party.
Yeah.
And, like I said, I think I said at the beginning, because I re-listened to the prologue of this, and, Grip was talking about how his thoughts have evolved about the companions, and then he ends with, I don't know, Tima's the one that makes sense because it's rage and scorn and betrayal, and that all feels familiar to me. So I don't. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing that this horrible being sometimes becomes part of our endeavors.
And we just learned a lot about her.
Yeah.
In all that research, a lot of it was about who she was day to day, who she was back in the college days, and as a member of their group. That's all really. She's a real person, I think. Like she just can't be here
Perhaps
right now.
more real than Dora.
Perhaps.
She's a real monster, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, your question, Robert, when you were saying, like, have any of us thought about it? I don't know if you all remember when Jamandor got dropped, and Roni was like, Tima better not say shit, or she and I are gonna have a problem.
Yeah, and Dora said, maybe don't antagonize her right now.
Yeah. But that is definitely a thought that still that was going through Roni's mind, and is now going through Vic's mind of, like, is there a way to control her, like, to...
And that's hard to talk with Dora about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no,
Is there a way to control either this thing inside you or the way you are controlling it. Like that's tough.
There's definitely a way to control Tima.
Just not let
But
her
there
out.
is no way for you to control me controlling Tima.
Oh
Right,
yeah,
right.
no.
Right.
But Vic trusts Dora
yes.
implicitly.
She doesn't have any interest in letting her out to play for idly,
Sure.
But if 2 bleed damage and a bumped up DC of a save is going to kill something,
Maybe so.
might be worth it. It depends on what it is. She watched you get your heart ripped out like multiple times in this campaign, in this act. And I don't think I was the brunt of a lot of damage, but I watched so much of it.
So punishing. To just go and we're all, a bunch of us are playing some Delta Green right now, and I think one of the sanity mechanics I love about that is just that simply exposure to violence can mess with your sanity.
Even justified. Justified needed violence.
And we're past that point with this particular sanity system. However, we're not past that point with how our characters feel and respond to that. Yeah.
Helplessness as well.
Yeah.
Is part of that mechanic where you can't do anything. Dora spent a lot of this book only being able to give combat advice.
Yeah.
And fire a crossbow. She's littered Thrushmore with missed crossbow bolts.
Yeah.
That's violence and helplessness. This was on display almost constantly the entirety of this act.
Oh yeah.
It's part of the town motto, I think.
Yeah. Violence and helplessness. Welcome to Thrushmore.
I mean, I would say that that's true of just about all of our characters for this act, where it's like we swing from when you're powerful and stuff, you are very powerful, and then all of a sudden you're like
very vulnerable.
Very vulnerable.
Because everybody had a fight where they kicked ass, and then everybody had fights where it's like you're either being pounded to death, you're being dex drained, con drained, you're being held helpless in tentacles, you have nothing to do and you're watching your friends die, like all of that stuff.
You don't roll over a 5.
Yes, for many weeks. Yes.
Yeah. There was a moment early on with Grip that I really found really interesting when he went out and he was like kind of enjoying the feeling of fear that he engendered in everyone.
Walking around with Ray. Yeah.
Which I was like, oh, this is really interesting / awful. Where it felt like he had really been sort of making this choice of like, oh, I don't want to be a bully. I don't want to be someone that like does that. And then to sort of be like, oh, but this feels really good. I was like, oh, this is
felt better than being scared.
Yeah. But I was like, oh, I can see how this could be very appealing. It was really fun to see you play with that.
Cool.
It's intoxicating.
Yeah. Of like, oh, I don't want to do this, but oh, it kind of feels good.
Despite that, because of that, I don't know. I think Grip's arc in this book was really interesting because I think he pushed toward good by the end and seemed that last conversation with Denman and all that. I loved it in the first book, and I loved it continuing on in this book. This really sort of careful examination that he is making of his own moral compass, to me, is really compelling and interesting.
I was so struck by the conversations with Dabbs around the midpoint.
Yeah.
Like the walking together and talking around Carcosa and how like careful Grip was being, but still trying to make a fucking point.
Yeah.
And also
really
trying to
honest.
take care of Dabbs, but also give Dabbs a warning. And, as Paul and I, of course, as you can imagine, we were having some offline conversations about, all right, we got to start really figuring out, like, what is the draw for this character to stay with this group of people? Right. What is their relationship to Carcosa in the long term? And we were just starting to come up with these ideas at the point that conversation happened. And it was like, yeah, this is so needed at that moment, and so interesting for both of their characters to have to grapple with.
I will say too, like, I as a player felt so bad for Paul as a player because of at that point Roni's paranoia and how Roni was treating you, and I was like trying to as the player, be like, I'm not trying to be a dick to you.
It's so hard.
It's so
been
hard,
a
but this
fun-
madness is awful.
It's added I think it's added a really interesting element, and it's fun to be as irritated with it as I am, and to let that be part of the interaction, because you and I have that. God, we said this in the last wrap up. We really actually love each other.
God, totally. You officiated my wedding.
Right.
Your characters say otherwise.
But our characters say other. No, I think the choice of how we're playing these madnesses, and like really leaning into how it affects us as a team, how it affects our relationships is what it's making it really interesting, because it's not just about affecting the die roll. It's like, what does it mean when you turn me down for something that I want to help you with?
I applaud you really for stepping up to the challenge and finding the way to stay with the party.
Absolutely.
Despite that, like, I really do, because that's very hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely a point in the Fort Harold course where I was like,
maybe I don't
bye.
stay. Yeah.
Good luck, everybody.
Hey, Rob, let's talk about another backup character.
Right.
And we all would have been like, okay.
Yeah, I can understand.
I understand.
Yeah.
We're treating dabs like shit. Okay.
Well, now with sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, in the thing of really leaning into the story element of it, where it's like, oh, we're not just players trying to beat up these monsters and stuff and save the castle. It allows for this really rich, nuanced, messy stuff that gets in the way of a perfect plan all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Which I'm like, oh, well, we would never have done this without the game mechanic of these madnesses.
I think this
Some of
is
these
the
choices we made.
messiest
Absolutely.
campaign we've ever played.
Oh, so messy.
By far.
Yeah, and it's fun how the madnesses are forcing a certain amount of messiness, forcing some choices.
Yeah.
And whether it's a very Robert's dealing with a madness that's very crunch abusive. It's abusive, it's brutal.
Yeah.
But
And-
not always. I mean, like in the first book, literally when they're like, here, take this axe and chop up this thing, he's like, get that fucking, like, and they're all like, what is going on?
Like, Katie's madness has not really affected her crunch this book, but of course it's heavily influenced Dora's worldview. Same thing with Vix. Obviously Vix is affecting his crunch as well. There's a lot of crunch crap going on with that paranoia.
Oh, man.
I'm glad you chose it, but it's
If I had known how debilitating it was, I don't know that I would have chosen it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I was just like, is there something like this in there? Because
And
I
I'm
feel
like,
like this is what
yes,
it would
let's
be
go
like.
with that before I read it.
Yeah. Yeah, no. But I feel like I love that we're doing that.
Yeah.
That we're just like, this is what feels appropriate.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one of my favorite moments with Dora was very recently. Again, like, I absolutely loved the scene between you and Tolman when he was talking about Ray's body and what it meant to son, how even though Dora didn't have that connection to it, was very practical. How because I often in a weird way think of Dora as sort of like our moral guideline for which is totally whacked. But when you have like a party made up of like hobo murders and stuff, like she is closest to some kind of.
To be fair, it's easiest for her because she is not wrestling with, did I put a knife to a kid's throat? And
It was an axe.
did I? Yeah.
You're like,
she isn't
that
wrestling with
truly
those
wasn't me.
things.
That's.
But I loved that scene because Tolman was pointing out, like, you are setting yourselves apart from the community that you have pulled together. And that really resonated for both me and Dora. Because Dora's, like Tima, pretty single-minded on these books, this research, this thing we're doing. We must take that, like, she got into that groove of staying on task and away from helping people. I think the last time she helped anybody was when she had therapy with you. And it's I liked that conversation as well. But my favorite part of the whole act was Jane.
Why? What's your
It just, on a meta level, it speaks to how long we've all been playing together and how well we all know each other and how we can, how we tell stories together and how we give each other the grace and space to really dig into things that are personal without crossing boundaries. You know, like Rob knows exactly how much that character means to me, and I trusted him to take it and do whatever he wanted to do with it, and it ended up being, I thought, a good story moment and very indicative of the tenor of this campaign to force us to kill someone we love, even though that isn't the person that we love.
Right.
But I know it was obvious to me in the interlude of Act 1 that we were all supposed to die. She was not supposed to run away, and so I applaud you and commend you for taking it and running with it and making it into a very powerful story moment, at least for me. I hope it was for other people. And I like the idea of our shared worlds and us as players being the tie that binds between all the characters we play in different campaigns and how they're all connected. And so that even though that was a very rough couple of episodes and I wouldn't see it coming, it was also a very warm, we've been playing together for so long moment for me that reinforced our friendship and our collaboration. So
yeah, we're very fortunate to have all these years of shared experience to draw on, whether it's a funny moment, a light moment, a dark moment, a sad moment, or whatever.
Let me see your sheet.
Yeah. Well, we can draw on that and turn that into something while we're sitting here.
Yeah.
In this dark room, staring at our screens with the cans on our head.
I think I had two favorite moments. If I'm going to pick two right now, I think the ambush of the Kuru.
Oh God!
That was one
Classic
of the most
Johnny
fun
tactics.
fight. Just overall, that the one shot was fucking brilliant. Yeah. But it was just a fun fight.
Yeah.
It was fun to listen to. It was fun to play.
Yeah.
We had morons. We had idiots. It was just pure old Pathfinder combat fun.
Yeah.
I thought, and then I thought especially the last one, but the whole journey of Ray post death has just been heartbreaking and beautiful. And I thought the last scene in the Wailing House was just awesome, and I can't wait to hear it when it's all done, because I just thought it was just great improv all around from everybody, and just a beautiful, beautiful scene, I thought.
And just for our listeners, because I know we've talked about this together here, but our listeners probably don't know, like, no part of that was planned in advance by any of us. I had no out. Like that was a situation I set up, and I'm like, they have to find a way to solve this. I had no plan for it, so everything that happened was what happened at the table and how everybody responded to what was going on. And like nothing that happened was an idea that I think any of us had before we began.
I had a glimpse of it in my original skill challenge, last scene of the skill challenge, of Ray needing forgiveness.
Right.
And so I went into that fight looking for that opportunity. I thought in the middle of the fight, oh no, I'm just gonna have to kill him. Like,
Rob's gonna make me kill him.
Yeah, and I was so mad. So I was like, I already killed Jane. Why are you doing this? But then that ally out of time, whatever that spell is, like, was just like,
across time, ally across time.
That feeds into the same reason that I like the whole Jane business, is like there are so many Darias and there are so many Rays, and these are just two of them.
Yeah.
And so it's not without hope. It's not without, it's not the end all be all of the story of Ray and Daria. And that I felt like there is a way out here.
And it's the same thing that's true about your actual characters that started this campaign. Like, we know, whatever that means to each of you, like, there was another life, and now there is this life, and that there are multiple possibilities for where lives go, what choices we make, and like stuff. Like, every time we find stuff like that, I just feel like it resonates through the whole weirdness of this entire setup, which asks you to think about choices in the past, choices in the future. Who am I now? Mm-hmm. Who was I then? Are those people in conversation, etc.?
I want to commend you, Rob, too, on that spell. We talked about it some off air, like right after that episode.
The ally spell?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Of just the idea of, if we existed in a world where you could summon an alternate version of yourself across space and time and have them show up, like how completely whacked out that would be.
Yeah.
And how probably in so many tables where that spell is used, it's just being used for crunch.
Right.
And instead the idea of like, oh no, this is a fantastic story element. Like anytime you cast this, you could summon a different version of yourself. Like how wild that would be.
And how they are having an experience.
Yeah.
It was one of
that's
you
the
who asked me,
terrifying
do they
thing.
have hit points? And I looked down and I'm like, they have hit points. I'm like, oh yeah, right. This is not an illusion. This is an actual living, breathing person who can die here, to answer whichever one of you asked
Who
me
was
that.
physically taken out of
Their reality.
It's not something that was created for this spell.
No.
They were ripped out of their reality.
And I'm like, that's wild. So I guess this is how Daria would be 17 now. What would she be doing? And then we're off to the races. It was fun.
Makes you think about those creatures you summon.
Also for anybody who's playing, if you ever have a player not able to make it, maybe they just got pulled across time. And that's why they're not there right then.
That happened to our two characters left in the woods, Johnny. they were pulled into a different reality.
There you go.
A better one.
Oh.
Yeah, let's talk about the death.
Oh.
So obviously, so unexpected. Like I think I said it. I don't know if I didn't say it on air. I had zero expectation that Ray was going to die because I have never, in however many decades of playing this game, seen the assassin's death attack work. Ever. The DC is so low. It has to be a series of multiple die rolls telling the story that this guy dies now. So I had no plan for it. I had no expectation of it. I thought this would just be an exciting attempted ambush that you all would solve and walk away, because I had other plans for episode 50. And suddenly like, well, this is what we're doing in episode 50. And then, it left us to figure out what death means in this campaign, which I also hadn't had a plan for. And suddenly, very quickly, we had to figure it out.
I think that's something that's, and you talked about this too, Robert, is having that death happen at 50, but then carry on through, another 40, almost 40 episodes is unexpected at the very least. And it's such an honor of the character to hear those echoes come back. It's just an interesting experience. And I felt very touched to re-experience Ray after having this distance of almost a year, like through different eyes, right? So it's been a kind of an odd gift to have to be at your own funeral in a way, and just to hear what the world has to say about your character once your character is dead.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask, because I've been truly sort of wondering about it and never really asked about it. How did you feel about when you were pulled back as a phantom?
That was a crazy experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude. And I felt, and I think you all recognized this right away, that I was like, this isn't me. I'm not voicing this character. He's now a tool for you. Like, I wasn't.
Ray had just died.
Yeah, literally.
Like
and
5
I was going
minutes
through
earlier.
I'm closing the book on Ray now, and I'm just going to breathe my way through this. And the idea of coming back, I don't know, I couldn't truck with it. And so I started to, I don't know, I feel like I started to balk at the idea.
Which is totally fine. Like, we talked
I wanted
about
to say yes but in the moment I was like,
But what we didn't do, and we talked about this off air, is that we didn't come and ask your permission. Mm-hmm. We didn't come and talk to you and go, hey, how would you feel about this? So it was the sort of thing where it was absolutely sprung on you. So,
but who's I don't know that it's necessary that you should have asked me. It's just a matter of yes-anding, and the fact that you guys were sensitive enough, thank you to hear that and to work around that, to hear me say, I actually don't want this to be the end of the character.
Great, and then we'll find another road then. Yeah.
And I think it ended up having interesting story consequences, just that little thing of what Bates did, and what it means to other people and what it means to him.
Yeah.
I'm sorry Bates won't be joining us in book 3 because I still think there's more story there to mine, but I also totally get it. Like, and you know, I think that little piece of the ongoing Ray story, that we didn't just let that fall by the wayside, that we didn't have an Inquisitor or Pharasma just ignore what what had happened. You know, like we this is what we've been doing the whole time, is taking these mechanics of classes and races and things you can do and blowing them up and saying, what does it mean that you have the ability to summon an ectoplasmic person that you may have known? Like, what does that mean?
And do you even understand what you're doing is a great question.
Yeah.
With all of these abilities.
Right.
Yeah.
He definitely did not.
He did not. It was a fun choice. What stands out amongst these psychometry visions this time? Last time around, I think it was the violin vision that grabbed everyone. For me, the finger bones, which was the first one in the book, was the most interesting experience because, you know, as we've talked about, I have had that since before we...
The Tima with the lie in the hand, that one?
Yeah. It's one of the ones I first wrote after I realized I had to write these. It was one of the very first ones. And with every expectation that it would come out in book 1. And then, you know, never happened. And of course, if it had, it would have changed Katie and Paul's ideas about their relation to each other, like what's going on in the past. Like you would have known definitively at that time what and who Dario was, not definitively, but you know, you would have much more of a sense. It would have meant much more to you because you still had really no sense of even. I mean, you had guesses,
right?
But the character didn't know.
But no, yeah.
I love to think about what if this one had been instead of that one. Like that blows my mind every time.
That one was my favorite too. It's very weird to say favorite. That was the one that stands out. But more so than that, what you just said. The idea that we could have gotten information in a different order haunts me from Act 1 and from Act 2.
As someone who replays the opening scenes of every video game
right?
1,000 times.
Yes. That's it's just like,
and we'll never know. We'll never know that universe where we learned that at a different time.
Yeah.
I mean, what would it have been like if the first one had been Roni's blade, Heartseeker?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone would be like, oh, so you're Roni Storch. Okay.
Yeah.
Why are you calling yourself?
Exactly. Yeah.
It would have been a whole different who the fuck actually are you?
It would have been much earlier and maybe more forgivable.
Yeah.
You know? Like maybe more. Maybe
if
less
that had happened
angsty.
Before the records room?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I like how everyone is still thinking that that's something that he needed to be forgiven for.
It's just their experience.
I know. I will say, for me emotionally, that is my favorite one. But for me as a player, my favorite one was Dora being like, I want to read that note that the people dropped off, the invitation. And literally you being like, oh, okay, all right. Well,
mechanically, that was the best one.
and then having that little scene of them playing of being like, we're going to invite them over and we're going to totally hit them the night before.
Yeah.
And just being like, oh, this
tactically,
is
that was amazing. And I loved it because it was so many things became clear. I was like, they still think they're dealing with Rip Tusk.
Yeah.
And the Triangle Man. And, you know.
They have no idea who you are.
They have no idea who we are. This is so great. It really felt at that point like we could do this. We could infiltrate Iris Hill. Like we have advantages. We know more than they do about what they're, you know, like we know more than they think we know.
They were so certain they were outsmarting you.
Yeah. It felt really good. That one felt really, really good.
It felt like a serious opportunity to like take all of the burden and turn it around so that it was on them. Yeah.
Yes.
And a little bit of permission, I think, to attempt the assault, because I know, you know, I've cut out a lot of conversations where you all are talking about like, I don't know if we're ready for this. I don't know if we can do this. Can we possibly get more? You know, it's just there was a whole lot of like, we're sensing that this is the time to do that, but we don't know.
We still think we're going to die doing it.
Yes, we're certain we're going to die. Right.
I think we can draw a line from going to Iris Hill at midnight when we know that they're going to go off and try to find us.
Yeah.
Directly to, let's just hang out and see if we can find the Kuru.
Yeah.
Ambush them.
Sure.
And just let's just wait. I think
because
that's
you still
all,
knew you were on top.
We were still on top.
I mean, that was one of those things where when we made it out of Iris Hill, and we hadn't gotten caught, we were just under the wire. I was thinking then.
Yeah.
I was like,
both
okay,
those things were you.
We're gonna come back. We can still they're still separated. We can pick somebody off.
Yeah.
We were riding that gambler's wave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You just going just until knowing when to walk away, as Kitty Rogers said.
And then we hit that skill challenge section, which was so cool.
Oh.
Like the scope of the activities that they were going after and what we had to do around all of that. That was...
Can you talk about how much of that's from the book?
0.
Yeah.
No,
What?
dog. You
0?
are awesome.
You did all of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. There is no skill challenge in the book.
Oh my. Oh.
Is there a response from Iris Hill if you
No.
do blah blah blah?
Oh
That's
my-
fucking awesome.
Anybody
That's so
listening
great,
to this,
dude.
so you have to then steal this and do a
Yeah.
skill challenge because
So
that is
cool.
a brilliant idea of a
I
way
did just
to do
this
that.
Yeah,
week
someone
share
is-
it with 2 different GMs who are running this campaign.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's very cool.
And again, that came out of listening to the 4 of you talk, sometimes on mic and sometimes before we're starting, of like, oh shit, what's she gonna do? What's she gonna do? And I'm sitting there going like, yeah, what is she gonna do? She has to do something.
You're not gonna just sit there and take it.
But knowing I cannot put the 4 of you and your characters through more combat. Just like, I'm like, I have to have a different solution to this. There has to be some way we can make choices and roll dice without having to fight more than we already have tonight, which at that point was chapters and chapters and chapters and chapters. Like, well, skill challenge, I don't know. I can make up a skill challenge. Let's make up a skill challenge. What would they do? And then that becomes fun, right? Then I'm like, okay, so they do this and this and this. They do this and this and this.
No,
But
it
you
was so
also
cool.
designed the mechanic of it. You tell me what you're gonna
Yeah.
you know, like it wasn't a skill challenge where you were dictating what skills could be used for each circumstances. You were saying, you convince me, tell me the story of what is happening in this little vignette with you and
Yeah, I just kind of prefer to do it that way anyways.
It's so choose your own adventure and like the best way of like, what am I going to get?
That's what that whole night
Yeah.
felt like, especially like, you know, I floated the maybe you all leave the room for stuff like that, and thinking you were going to say no, and you're all game for it. And I'm like, that ended up being the piece of it that I thought was so cool.
Because how else are we all going to wind up accidentally at the same place together while ignoring a whole event?
Yes.
Like that wouldn't have happened, I think, if we were if we had all stayed in the room.
And then how you all, like I had secret hopes that we'd all end up at separate places for the last stuff. And then that is just kind of how we ended up. And I'm like, oh, this is just, like the story of this is unfolding in a way that makes sense. Like it makes sense what you did over the course of the night and what happened. And yeah, that was fun.
And there were victory points.
Yes, there was.
For most of you.
You got one.
I got one.
You got one.
One of the things that I think that I really love about the skill challenge is that I felt like it gave us opportunity to also explore the characters in a way that we hadn't had before.
Yeah.
Which was really kind of amazing.
Yeah.
It was just...
It's like we've had role-playing encounters and combat encounters, and we hadn't kind of had that middle ground of like, I'm rolling dice and doing stuff, but it's more about my feeling of the kind of choice I want to make rather than the tactical I swing.
Yeah, the story, it's like it's again like a shared storytelling thing where we are given more ownership of telling a larger part of the story.
Yeah.
Which was really, really fun.
And you get to highlight this idea that the world doesn't freeze when we're doing things. Like the world continues on, and so we have to make choices, and there's consequences to our choices.
Or like a video game where, you know, someone snipes a monster from 100 feet away, and the monster falls down, and like the guards rush over, and they're like, "Oh, Jim's dead." And they're kind of like, oh, we should do something about that. Are you out there? Are you out there? And then like 5 minutes later in game time, they're like, well, I guess I better just start circling the perimeter again.
Back to my post.
Jim's still lying there dead, and everyone's like, oh, Jim.
No one's in that tall grass.
Exactly.
You want to talk about stuff that's not in the book?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man!
And then the other thing.
Oh, yeah,
no,
go ahead.
you had said you would tell us in the skill challenge if we had got the best result.
yeah.
What
18
would
or
have
higher.
happened?
So the way I had put that was the cultists all abandon her. So it would have been just her and effectively the monsters. So like the vampires would have stayed, the keeper would have stayed. But yeah, so like every single one of the cultists, Daggerbotha, it would have been a sort of mass
Daleen?
exodus. Yeah, gone.
So I would not have gotten the
You would not have got the item.
investments. Yeah. We won.
You won. You actually got the best result, right?
Yeah.
In terms of stuff that's not in the book, we're getting to this point in any pre-written adventure where what we are doing starts to take over a lot of what is in. That's just the nature of at least how we play through these things.
We're not going to cut out a full book, though.
It depends where you teleport us to, Johnny.
There is one point in this
no.
AP where I'm like, okay, I hope
That's
he
the
doesn't do it.
flashpoint.
But if he does it, we're following it. We'll see. Anyways, so
Will Johnny throw us out of this book again?
So I just added a couple bullet points down here. The things that you probably knew or guessed, you already knew some of that early stuff. Like I replaced, of course, random NPCs in the book with Jane. And there was like a druid named Daradella who was a friend of Melison's, and Dr. Trice. Like that was just some random revenant who you killed before. There is nothing even remotely like the solstice night suggested in the book. I'm sure you all could tell that as we were doing it because I was just frantically making shit up on the fly with my couple of scrawled bullet points. And then I leaned on you all because I asked you all, like, hey, bring in some stories. And I didn't tell you why.
Right.
But of course, that was all made up just for what we were doing. There's no notion of the players having a house in the book. The go bag is there, but no keys and a deed and that kind of stuff. I was just interested to see like what you all would do with that.
How much they would argue over the ownership of the house.
I hadn't expected it to be like 20 chapters worth of argument, but and obviously Cassadia, like Winter, is not written to be killed off. Like in fact, none of the NPCs in the book are written to be killed off. This one was really, really a sandbox in that there is detail in all these locations. And there's like a handful of events suggested. The Revenant, the Doomsayer yells at one of them. At one point, Reese tries to assassinate one of them. But otherwise, there's no plot.
Was the Revenant supposed to be someone that a party member had killed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What about the Great Harvest, though? That's the plot of...
The phrase "the Great Harvest" does not exist anywhere in the AP.
What? Oh my god!
Wow.
That's insane.
There is almost no explanation in the book as to what Melison's up to.
Oh my god.
There's no indication of what her plans are and no indication of how she plans. Like, she's going to try to activate the standing stones, but there's no explanation of what that means. And I got the entire idea of the Great Harvest. This was entirely came off of you all. Because I think, so Doro was reading the mind of one of the scum, and I just improv'd some like, it's sad that it won't be able to harvest these souls. And I think Paul was like, ooh, a harvest sounds like religious terminology. Can I make a knowledge religion check on that? And I'm like, oh, sure. He's surely going to fail because he's going to roll a 6, like Paul always does. And then you rolled really, really high, and I was like, oh, shit, I got to give him something. And I'm like, well, doesn't the Great Harvest sound like one kind of terminology for, I don't know, maybe a religion that might also think of culling sheep or whatever. Maybe it's the underwater. I don't know. I just was like riffing off the top of my head, and then you all latched onto this idea of there being a great harvest, and suddenly I'm like, okay, there's a great harvest.
Wow.
That is now how Melison thinks of what's happening, and then I built everything off of that.
Oh my god!
Wow.
That's amazing. Wow.
There's no night hag.
There's no night hag?
Again, that all came from you. You went and talked to Lelwyn, and you were so convinced that something was up with him. I was like, well, something's got to be up with him. What would be up with him? Oh, here's a way to get some of this story out. Oh, he's haunted. What's he haunted? Oh my God, why one of the night hags was there when Ariadne was there. And then suddenly we've got like multiple chapters of story out of that gets out key background information in a way that I didn't have any other solution on how to get out.
So wait, then was the ritual the occult ritual, is that actually in that book, or did you create that too, that we used to summon the night hag?
Oh, you used an item to do that. You used that incense.
Oh, the candle.
The
thing.
candle. The
That's
candle.
right.
To trap
the
it.
Candle
To
to
trap
trap
it,
it.
Yeah.
Because we didn't summon it. It was coming to
It was
torment
there,
him.
yeah.
And we used that to just bind it.
So the candle was for some other real story purpose, not this. Oh, crap.
Oh my gosh.
But the gibbering mouther
but
on
think
Pier
about,
19, that's in the book, right?
That's in the book. And there is, like, Clemmis Pratt's ghost is in the basement. I think the intention probably at one point was like, let's throw a ghost into book 2 because there's a candle that can make the ghost be solid. Here's one of my favorites. Skywyn Freeling and the Sullen Starling are not in this book.
No.
But you had artwork. You had artwork for
She's
her.
not introduced until book 3. And I just, so as someone who's trying to make this as literary and thoughtful as possible from a framing standpoint, I'm like, so I'm supposed to put you on this long river journey with a
total
group of people that
strangers.
you have no relationship to. And I mean, of course, you would build a relationship, but I'm like, wouldn't this be more rich if you started that river journey in relationship with these people? And I actually had no intention or thought or expectation that you would all spend the whole book on the ship. I just thought you'd meet them.
I mean, there was that one time when you were like, okay, where are you going to move everybody? Because you can't keep them on the ship anymore. And we were like, no, we're keeping them on the ship.
And I was
we were
like,
like,
we reject the premise of your statement.
we were like, no, not going to do that.
You were not going to be railroaded in that.
Yeah.
And I was
Like,
simply trying
none
to
of
get
those
you off the
places
thing
are
that I was
safer.
like, oh, this was just supposed to be like, yeah, we'll check in with Skywyn over the course of the book and kind of get to know she exists. And it's like, worked out great because now you all are in relationship with her and her crew.
What about Lynn and Dim?
They don't exist.
Oh my god. I reject
of
that
them.
premise
I love-
completely.
I'm backtracking for a second, completely out of order, but I also want to say one of my favorite scenes to get to do was the Bates and Maeve scene at Ray's spot.
Over the body.
That scene was so much fun.
It really was. And
I want to say thank you again.
and thank you to you. And like all those little ones where all we knew was like, hey, Rob, I think I want to talk to so-and-so. And so just in other words, make time for that. But I had no idea what you were going to say. I had no idea what her response would be. And like this scene comes out of it. All those little things like that are so much fun. Jamandor is barely mentioned in this book.
No.
Shut up.
Shut your pie hole. Shut your Jamandor
Fuck.
hole.
There is
What is in this book?
Seriously, what is in this
Anything?
book? We don't want to. We're not denigrating the writers, but we are curious.
No, it's an amazing sandbox is what it is. It's here are the NPCs, here are the key locations. Have fun.
Wow.
So this.
But I will. So obviously, Jamandor is an ongoing concern in the adventure. But because the way these things are written as they're published, someone's writing one book as the person's like getting edits on the next book, and they knew they were building towards Jamandor, but they hadn't quite figured out how to seed Jamandor in throughout.
No pun intended.
Hey.
So what the druid that Jane replaced.
That's the couple of few references in this book. It's like she worships Jamandor, and there's scrawled, his holy symbol is scrawled on the wall. That's
It doesn't say she would infect the players as soon as possible, or is that just taken as read?
That's just you cheating.
Well,
It's
and
just
this
not
the
cheating.
whole way we're playing this infestation is also not part of things as written. It's part of how.
You made that up too.
No. We'll talk more later.
You've
we'll talk more later.
definitely written all of the Inmost Blot's dreams.
That's right. The research of Lowell's journals was not intended to be in this book. That was intended to be the next book, but I wanted there not to be a book where we didn't do any research. And there's a lot more research in book 3, so I was like, I can afford that here. And finally, Weiralai,
Oh, God.
Shut up.
never mentioned in book 1 at all.
No.
She first appears 4 pages from the end of book 2 in like essentially the penultimate room with just a couple of sentences devoted to her, that she's responsible for bringing the PCs here. And it specifically says she doesn't bother to remind the PCs of that fact because she knows that they have amnesia. So like she's basically envisioned as a combat encounter. But the first time I read that, I was like, no, I'm sorry. This is the person that brought them here? That's got to have some meaning, doesn't it? How in the world would I make this have meaning? This random denizen of Lang sitting in a room in the basement. Like, wow, she's just got to be part of the story.
So baffled. I was so shocked that was not a bigger bad of the overall
the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because the way you built her up was so great, and I thought, we're gonna have to deal with her till at least book 5.
Yes.
So that was interesting.
I wanted dread when you met her, right? Like that's what I wanted.
You got it.
Yeah,
You definitely got dread. Yeah.
That was earned.
I'm trying to avoid the AP thing of you only ever meet the big bad 2 seconds before you fight and kill them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But great, we'll have more conversations about this when we have our Q&A with listener questions. Thanks, y'all. It's been fun.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Dark Nexus is a creation of Plug and Hum Productions. This podcast uses trademarks and/or copyrights owned by Paizo Incorporated, which are used under Paizo's community use policy. We are expressly prohibited from charging you to use or access this content. This podcast is not published, endorsed, or specifically approved by Paizo Inc. For more information about Paizo's community use policy, please visit paizo.com/communityuse. And for more information about Paizo and Paizo products, please visit paizo.com. That's PAIZO.com. Dark Nexus uses music and soundscapes by Sirenscape. Check them out at sirenscape.com. That's SYRINSCAPE.com. Opening and closing themes, along with additional music, composed by Rob Kauzlaric. Artwork for Dark Nexus is by Matt Wahlquist. Special thanks to Toy, without whose generosity this project would not have been possible. And thanks to DMCP, Richard and Ari, Paul and Shannon, Chris, Scotty, Jason, Jess, Joe, Chelsea, Matt, Dave, Darren, and everyone we've gamed with over the years for all the memories and inspiration.